too. So, here with Adam from. Oh, we're still saying it.
The introduction.
Yeah, we'll just very quickly start. I'm here with Adam from Barr Farms, and we're going to talk a little bit about community-supported agriculture and some of their permaculture initiatives. We are very proud to be a pickup location for Barr Farms community-supported agriculture, and we firmly believe that food is the first medicine, and having access to locally grown organic foods and grass-fed meats is really unique in this area. Adam, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. That's great. We are an certified organic vegetable farm, Barr Farms, offering also some pastured meats, grass-fed beef, pastured poultry, and pastured pigs. And we try to partner with the consumer through a CSA program, we call it, Community Supported Agriculture, where we get folks invested before the season starts and go ahead and get an idea of what they're going to have throughout the season on their preferences, and try to offer them a customized box of vegetables and or meats each week or bi-weekly. So we're trying to provide as many options as possible, and we deliver here in E-Town. We're excited to be partnering with Raja Wellness in the second year now, we're just thrilled that there's folks out there who are passionate about organic agriculture because they want to eat the healthiest food they can get, and we are excited to be, for 13 years now, trying to grow that food for our members.
So we have, one of the things we talked about before is some of your work in developing permaculture and crops that provide food from one season to the next.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's a little bit different from our traditional annual model of food production.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a passion of mine. It's more of a longer term thinking there because annual agriculture dominates the food supply in our system right now. Corn, soybeans, and wheat, they're all annual crops. You plant them at the beginning of the season and harvest them at the end. So perennial crops are crops that you plant once and you cultivate and take care of for years at a time. Those don't include any tree crops, nuts, fruit trees, also things like asparagus, longer living vegetable plants that you can harvest on a yearly basis. So right now we have a system that's based a lot on annual vegetables. Almost everything you see in the grocery store that's a vegetable is planted and harvested within a month to 2 months, sometimes 3 months or longer of planting. And it just takes a lot of working the soil in order to do that. You're turning the soil, or in the case of the monoculture farmers, they're spraying the soil, for the corn and soybeans.
Right.
Organically, we don't do that, but we still till. And so part of our tillage program is to build the soil organic matter as much as possible, so that we're not taking away from the plant and the biological life that's in the soil. It's much easier to do that, though, if you have a perennial-based system where you're not disturbing the soil. So between our vegetables and in our different fields, we're dedicating areas that are, an acre and a half here, in a 2-acre vegetable field, maybe an eighth of that will be planted to trees so that we can plant the vegetables in between. Longer term thinking being that we would be able to harvest the tree crops anywhere from 5 to 10 years from now.
And that would give you some more variety of maybe some of the shade-loving vegetables that wouldn't do well on an open field,
right,
that you could actually grow more successfully there.
Right, and there's some of those as well. So it's just a different way of thinking and a different model too than what we're used to.
So last year we had these little, almost like strawberry-looking things that are a fruit of one of the Chinese trees.
Yeah.
Did those work out? Will we be seeing those again this year?
Well, that was, we only planted a small section of that as an experimental crop because we just didn't know what it was. So I've done that with a few things, but it's not something we planted in abundance. It was we've definitely focused on the more traditional fruit crops for here: apples,
Right.
pears, peaches, cherries, and so that's definitely fruit is difficult to grow in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out for a lot of reasons.
Have you tried any of the goji berries?
I haven't. So there's one to think about, and
I know there's someone down in Glasgow that's been growing them for about 10 years, and they seem to do pretty well.
yeah,
But the goji berries, the mulberries, and something called a bitter melon are things that we look for from an herbal perspective because they're very good at regulating blood sugar. They help with stabilizing the metabolism, and so for somebody with early onset diabetes or a family history of type 2 diabetes, being able to incorporate those kinds of foods can actually help slow the progression
wow,
of that disease.
that's great.
And I can't think of the name of it, of that fruit that you grew, but it's also one of those that has that blood sugar stabilizing effects.
Okay,
It doesn't have a real high fructose content,
right.
but some of the other components of it help to stabilize the blood sugar.
That one, colloquially, we were calling it just like a che tree, which is perhaps the Chinese, or a melon fruit, because it had that little bit of flavor
Yes.
that was reminiscent of watermelon. We do have mulberries in abundance, wild mulberries, but we've also started to plant some cultivated types of those as well. And yeah, that's something we've seen do really well in this area.
Yeah, the mulberries, especially dried, you can add them to teas, you can add them into cereals. They keep really well.
That's good to know because they're extremely perishable. Like you put them in a fridge or anything, and you've got to use them within a few days. So if they were dried, that would be an easier process.
Yeah, and there's actually certain times of year when we can actually use the leaves and the bark off those trees as well for medicinal teas. So we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Now that I know you have them.
Mulberries are in abundance on our property, wild ones. But then again, we try to watch. That's the other one of the principles of permaculture is like watching what is happening actually in nature and seeing what is doing well already on its own, and then trying to amplify that in a way that would benefit the food supply.
Right.
Yeah.
We were in North Carolina. They have a huge herb market. You would have loved it. They had all kinds of starts of some of the different plants, and I showed you a couple that we brought back.
Yeah, that's cool.
But there also was something that grows up in Appalachia called the rakes, which is ramps. I keep calling them rakes.
They're here too.
Okay.
Not on our farm. We don't have a ramp farm, but there's definitely ramps in and around Louisville. It likes wet soil and a north-facing slope. So a couple farmer friends of ours have an abundance of ramps.
Those were actually quite good, and we were using the leaves as well as the bulbs.
Nice.
And I got some of the apple cider vinegar preserved bulbs, which really makes a great dressing.
It's funny that Chicago, I think that word is actually an indigenous word or based off of it, but that area is really abundant in ramps, and whatever the name that they associated with that place meant like stinky bog, because the ramps grow in abundance and they're an onion family, and they have a very pungent odor, like garlic, more so.
Right. Yeah. There's now, have you looked at, will we see any of some of the less traditional greens this year, like the dandelions or?
That one I don't plant.
Most
no,
people don't have to.
I know you don't have to plant it a lot. I haven't done that. I have. It's been challenged because a lot of the consumers that we work with are just used to seeing what they see in the grocery store.
Right.
And so, in order to really fit into that market, we kind of have to spin off of that. And so, definitely when I started out and I had a smaller business, I was experimenting so much more. But I kind of had to go more the traditional, carrots, kale, basics first, because unfortunately the culture of eating vegetables in Kentucky is already very low.
Yes.
So we're trying to build that up as well as we build the market, which,
right.
We got to eat more vegetables in general.
And the broader variety of vegetables that we can incorporate, the better for both our GI health as well as from a nutrient perspective.
For sure.
We've been focusing on the vegetables and the fruits. Let's talk a little bit about the meats and some of the differences between a store-bought meat and what we get from you.
Sure. I mean, that's already kind of spinning off of the annual versus perennial agriculture discussion. if you're raising animals and you're able to pasture them as much as possible, like a cow, for example, doesn't need to eat corn, so we 100% grass feed all of our cows. They don't eat corn ever. It changes the complexity of the meat. It doesn't create the fats that are not as healthy for you that than you would then consume through the animal. So we focus on healthy pastures there, and grazing is fundamental to perennial agriculture because grass grows abundantly in Kentucky. We all know that.
Right.
So we also try to get all the animals that do eat grain in order to fatten up our pigs and chickens. So we are trying to work with a local farmer there who's raising non-GMO grains for us and grinding our feed locally. So
awesome.
That's been a big transition. I mean, that's a big passion of mine. Is when I started, I was like totally wanted to be alternative to the conventional. But as I've grown into the business, I've realized we've got to work with our neighbors and help transition towards a more sustainable agriculture with the people who are doing it right now. So fortunately, I have a neighbor who was really keen on the idea, and he grinds the feed for our pigs and our chickens, and we're able to get the pigs and chickens out on grass as well, so that they can consume some baseline of forage, again, for their
Right.
health, but also being fattened on those non-GMO grains.
Well, and I can tell you as a horse person, there's some concerns about long-term exposure to the GMO grains for the health of our horses. So I would be interested in getting the name of your neighbor if he
Yeah.
has extra to sell, and I'm sure there's some other horse people that would be interested in his grains.
Sure. I think he's definitely interested in expanding that, because the way that conventional farming has gone, just to talk about that very briefly, is they're always just the bottom dollar price, and
Right.
the export market is terrible. So he is definitely aware of that and trying to grow enough so that he can value add by grinding feed for people. So
Yeah.
I think he'd be interested in that. I don't know if he's made a horse feed before, just because he runs other animals, but
Corn,
probably
oats, and
similar.
barley.
Yeah, pretty similar.
A little bit different ratios, but yeah.
Right. More
it's-
starch in their diet and more
Depends
fiber.
a little bit on the horse.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, we can talk about that.
Sure,
at some
yeah, I'll
point.
pass you his name along.
Do we have any questions on there, Mary?
No.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll go ahead and round this up for right now. And if anybody watches this and has any questions, feel free to post them, where we can always reach out to Adam and get answers to those for you. And thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.